You're listening to the Mike Salk Show
Powered through the Alaska Airlines Studio.
on Seattle's Sports Station.
All right, rolling along here, Mike Salk Show on Seattle Sports on 710, seattlesports.com as well. And happy to be joined by Bobby Wagner, current Rams linebacker. It still sounds a little weird to say it, Bobby. I'm sure you've heard it now a couple of times, but it still has to sound a little funny. Congratulations, and how is it so far?
Thank you. Definitely, it's different, but I'm enjoying it. I think my family is excited to have me closer to home, and it's been fun so far.
I was thinking about that. So you still have a bunch of family in the L.A. area, right? You grew up in the Inland Empire, not too far. What was their reaction? What was their input on coming back to L.A.?
Well, yeah, their input, obviously, they were pushing me to come back home or come to L.A. You know, Seattle was nice because, you know, it's still on the West Coast, and so when they heard that there was an opportunity for me to kind of be closer to home and still be close to Seattle, that was kind of the big push. Ultimately, they wanted me to be happy, but, you know, deep down inside, they wanted me to stay close to home.
When you say family, who is that? Who was the loudest voice?
I think the person I talk to the most is my pops. That's my sisters, my nieces, my nephews, literally like all my immediate family, my grandmother. Everybody is in either Ontario, Inglewood. So that's definitely kind of, you know, was the mindset behind the decision.
What's it been like? I mean, you get to meet a new group of teammates, a new group of coaches. What has that experience been like?
It's been nice. I mean, you know, like I said, you've been used to something for 10 years, and so, you know, you kind of, not necessarily a rookie, but you come into a new space, and you have to, you know, relearn everybody. You know, in Seattle, I knew everybody from the cooks to people in the mailroom to equipment to obviously everybody on the staff, and so now it's kind of, you know, building that relationship with everybody, and so it's nice. I haven't met, you know, everybody on the team yet, but, you know, I'm sure, you know, we'll get to that point at some point.
How well do you know those guys? I mean, are there players that you were friendly with, coaches that you knew before? How familiar are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the players, a lot of the coaches as well. Obviously, you know, when I got released, you know, Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey were the first people to kind of reach out to me and just talk about, you know, how great it would be to kind of team up, and you know, obviously LA is not a hard place to sell. So,
what's that conversation like? Aaron Donald calls you. You've been released. We can talk a little bit more about that here in a couple minutes and kind of how you felt about it. But you get a call from Aaron Donald. What was that conversation like?
Well, he just, you know, kind of talks about, you know, just mentioned how much he admired my game, and you know how dope it would be to partner up instead of going against one another. And that's kind of pretty much it. It wasn't, you know, obviously, you know, everything was happening so fast, and so we didn't dive into everything. But, you know, again, like I said, you know, to have somebody of that caliber, you know, want to play with you and admire your game, it's humbling.
And those are actual phone calls. I mean, I tend to think of most people these days as texting more than phone calls, but you get an actual phone call?
It's not always phone call.
Okay.
It wasn't a phone call. I called him after, we talked after, you know, after I signed. But, you know, a lot of it, like you said, a lot of it is not phone calls. It's more text. And
then you get to meet the coaching staff, right? And certainly, you know, they've gotten a lot of praise over the last few years, and reigning champs, et cetera, everything Sean McVay brings. What was your impression of what they're doing there?
The first thing that popped out to me was just their energy. You know, when I went in and met with them, you know, we watched some film, and just the energy in the room was just crazy. And it was just, you know, before you know it, we watched like 2 or 3 hours of film, and you would have never even known it, just because the energy is so high. And so that was the first thing that stood out to me. Obviously, they got some things that they do differently, but, you know, I'm just excited to be around those guys. It's a lot of energy, and it's a lot of people who seem to love what they do.
And is your role similar in their defense as it's been here for the last decade?
Yes and no. I mean, I think, you know, Seattle was kind of getting to that point where they were going to transition from some of the stuff that we've done the last, you know, 9 to 10 years. We started doing a little bit these last few years, but I think they were kind of, especially with the, you know, the new defense coordinator and, you know, the guys they brought in, they were going to kind of make a full commitment to kind of changing the way that you know, we ran some stuff. So, you know, I think it was going to be different. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm going to be in the middle of the field, patrolling the middle of the field, and making sure nobody catches the ball over the middle of the field, which is kind of what I've done my whole career.
Can you help me understand some of that? I mean, Pete has always said that it's a 4-3 that he's run, but with some 3-4 personnel and 3-4 concepts. What does that mean for the guys in the middle? What does that mean for a middle linebacker like you?
I think the biggest thing when you have something like that is more the fronts. And so that's when you pay attention to some of the fronts that we have, there are some 4-down linemen, but there are some moments where we run that stick front and you have, a lot of bodies up, a lot of bodies canceling out the gap. So I think the biggest difference is the fronts and how that affects the linebackers it just changes your gaps responsibility. But as far as like the pass coverage stuff, the pass coverage is the pass coverage. And, when you change the fronts, it's just more, if you look at our defense, like last year, just the type of fronts that we were running, we had a nose right over the center. We had 2-3 techniques with their right outside the guards, and then we had the tackles. And so that's kind of the similarities versus like an over front. There's an open A gap, open B gap for the middle linebackers and a will.
Talking to Bobby Wagner, former Seahawks linebacker, still sounds a little funny to say it. And obviously it sounds like, you were not wild about the way that went down. What happened with your release?
I just think that it was an opportunity to communicate, and it was missed. I found out through other sources, and, kind of like what I said in my press conference, I felt like after 10 years, we should have been able to just have a conversation. I understand I represent myself, and I understand that kind of makes things hard, but, life is hard, and we've been around each other enough, had enough difficult conversations where, it shouldn't have turned out that way. But, kind of like I said, I have no hatred towards the Seahawks. I have no hatred towards Seattle. I love Seattle. Seattle is a place that I call my home. Still to this day, regardless of where I be at, I'll still be in Seattle. And so, I feel like some point, we'll have a conversation and, we'll right that wrong, but we just haven't yet.
Well, I want to hear more about that in a moment. I want to hear about how Seattle became home for you, because I think it's a really important part of who you are and what your last decade was like since first moving here. But I just kind of want to make sure I understand this because, there's been a lot of focus on it. I mean, as your own agent, they would need to come to you. I'm trying to walk through this and say, hey, Bobby, we're not sure what's going to happen here. We might trade you. We might release you. We might change the salary. How does that conversation work?
I think it's as simple as that. I think the idea, in my opinion, over the years has been, the toughest part about a player representing himself is not always the negotiation. It's more the relationship standpoint. And, when you have an agent, you can come to the agent and say whatever. You can say the player's slowing down. You can say we don't think the player adds any value to the team. Or you could say we want to trade them. You could say all these different things, and then they could change their mind and want to keep the player, and then the player would never know about that. And so without having the agent, you have to have those conversations with the player instead of the agent. But, my take on it is I have a lot of respect for John. I have a lot of respect for Pete. And I have a lot of respect and understanding of the business side of things, and I've always expressed that. And so, if that was the conversation where they came to me and said, hey, we're thinking about trading you, we're thinking about getting rid of you, we're thinking about doing this with with your pay, we would have just had a conversation. Whether we agreed or disagreed with whatever they came across with, that would have simply just been it, in my opinion.
Do you think you could have come back if that had happened? What do you think you could have returned and played at the same level if that had happened and then it didn't end up coming to pass?
Yeah, I do believe so because, again, like I said, like Seattle, like Seahawks is more than just that to me. That they're like it became like my home. It became, what has defined like my career up until this point. And so for me, I've always expressed to them that I have, in my opinion, a little bit more understanding on the business side, and I've been able to take the emotions out of it. Like I do feel like there's two parts of it. Like when I'm in there and we're talking contracts and we're talking money and we're talking salary, all those things, like that's, to me, that's the agent Bobby. That's not the player Bobby. Now, when we're talking thematics and we're talking blitzing and coverage and all those things, that's the player. So to me, I don't feel like I would have taken it personally. And I was actually looking forward to showing that to them if they gave me the opportunity to get whatever they decided to do, because again, I understand it's a business and they got to do whatever's best because their job's on the line too. So, and I get that. And so, to me, it would have been that simple, but I understand why they they probably had other thoughts and maybe thought that it wouldn't have been that simple.
What do you think you'll miss most about Seattle?
Besides the people, the water, our facility, it's very rare that you come out to the field and you're looking at water like that. Obviously, I haven't been to other places, but, I would say that, the city, the people. Even when I got released, when I was walking around the city or when I was walking around, town, the amount of people that came up to me that expressed how they felt and, I had their support was humbling to me. And so that's why, regardless where I end up at, regardless of how my career turns out these remaining years, Seattle will always be a place I'll return to.
Do you think you understood, take me back, 2012, 13, 14, that time, did you guys know how special it was, you and Sherm and Cam and Mike B and Earl and KJ? You could go on forever and still leave off Cliff, really important people. Did you guys know how special it was at the time?
I knew how special – I think we knew how special it was, or we thought we knew how special it was. But I think we didn't realize it until we started separating. And until, guys either retired or went to other teams or did other things. Then, for me at least, it's when you're in a locker room with other people and you're seeing how hard it is to get guys to commit to being great. Then you realize how really special that was, because with us you didn't have to. It wasn't that hard. We wanted to be great and we were willing to sacrifice and do whatever we had to do to be great. And that's when I realized, okay, we were more special than we even realized at the time.
There must have been a moment as you guys were coming together and realizing that no one needed to motivate you each. Right? There wasn't one person that needed to stir the whole drink. It really does seem like you had a group of 6, 8 people, whatever the number is, that were all kind of similarly motivated. Is that right?
Yeah, we were all motivated. We were motivated by different things, but we were motivated. And I think the thing that was cool about it too was, when we all came in, we were all around the same age, and so we all could understand one another, and we all can push one another because we built those relationships. So, when a guy wasn't, doing what he needs to do, whether it's on the practice field, weight room, whatever, we would, call one another out. We kind of, say something, and we would never take it personally because we knew that person just wanted to get the best out of us.
You ever get really mad at one of those guys?
All the time. All the time.
It would seem impossible not to be friends with Sherm and Earl and some of those guys and not occasionally get really mad at them.
Yeah, because again, we're all, you're talking to all alpha males. So even when it's something as small as who's the best basketball player on the team, or who has the best team, who has the best NBA team, or who has the best athletes from whatever state, they will become passionate conversations because everybody's prideful, and so even those conversations could get heated. But at the end of the day, you knew that it was all love.
Who's the best basketball player?
Me. For sure.
Who's the second best basketball player?
Sidney Rice.
Oh, Sidney's a good dude, huh?
Sidney's amazing.
Yeah.
One of my favorites of all time.
Do you think it could have lasted longer, Bobby? Do you think there was a way for that group, the Legion of Boom, and however you want to refer to that defense in general, was there a way, could it have lasted longer than it did?
I think there was a way for it to last longer, but obviously, hindsight's 20/20. There's a lot of stuff that we couldn't have predicted. Obviously, they paid all of us once, but to be able to pay all of us twice was going to be very difficult. Obviously, the injuries that certain guys were suffering from and happened to them, you couldn't have anticipated. So, some of the stuff that happened was kind of out of our control. But, I do feel like, we were able to stay together longer than historically people have been able to do.
When did you become a captain for this defense?
I feel like, in my mind, when I walked in, because I played the linebacker position, the middle linebacker position, that kind of already kind of puts you in a leadership role. But, I would say maybe my second or third year, I think my first couple of years, I just wanted to to learn, and I had amazing leaders, whether it was Sherm, whether it was Michael Bennett, whether it was Cam. Cam was one of the biggest leaders of us all. And so you wanted to learn from those guys. And then once they kind of passed that torch to me, I just had to make sure I did right by it.
Yeah, it seemed like from the outside watching that, as some of those guys started to move on, your vocal leadership increased, and especially outward facing, not necessarily in the locker room, but towards the media, towards the fans, that, as some of those guys moved on, you had to take on some of that role as the public facing face of the team and face of the defense. Is that something that took work? Was that something that was natural to you? How did that come about?
Well, I think it definitely took work. And the reason why I say that is because I think when you grew up and you watched Ray Lewis, and even like watching guys like Cam, they had a certain way about them, certain style about them, and you kind of wanted to follow that. But in that process, I may have gotten away from how I did things, and so it took one of the off seasons to kind of get back and say, like, let me find my voice, let me find what does leading look like to me, and let me master that. Let me not try to be somebody else, and let me not try to do what other people have done, even if it's good. But let me figure out, what does the leadership style look for me? What does my voice look like? How do I talk to the guys? How do I relate to the guys? What does that look like to me? And how can I master that?
What'd you come up with?
Well, I just spent the off season. And I kind of like put together like people that I like how they talk and I like how they grab their attention. So I listen to Malcolm X speeches. I listen to Ray Lewis speeches. I listen to Barack Obama speeches. And I listened to Kendrick, how he, spoke. And I listened to Jay-Z, how he spoke. And I listened to Nipsey. And I kind of put all that together. And I just learned how they were able to capture people's attention in their unique ways. And then I try to do it in my own way.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say anything quite like that. And we talk a lot, and obviously on the radio, we're constantly thinking about how people play on the field, et cetera. And leadership, I think, is one of those qualities that people assume is innate, that people are either born with it or they're not, right? Oh, that person's a great leader or they're not a great leader. Where did you get the idea to even start studying that group of people? Is that entirely your own? Did you talk to people? Where did that come from? It's fascinating.
Well, yeah, I kind of talked to different leaders. I was able to talk to, Ray Lewis. I was able to talk to my coach, Ken Norton. I was able to talk to different people. I got a chance to meet with a lot of the CEOs and out there, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's, Amazon, whoever, got to meet those guys and see how they thought about it. And then so, I just kind of just started peeling back the layer by layer. Then I just got the idea of just like, man, I had listened to a Barack Obama speech, and I listened from start to finish, and I liked how he tied everything together. And I was like, okay, let me listen to more of that. And I'm like, okay, well, there got to be more people that kind of do this. And so I just started listening to different people, listening to how they spoke and how they talked, and kind of the cadence of how they did it, and started working on what my cadence looked like.
I really enjoyed what you did with community groups and shining the spotlight on those groups over the course of the last few years during your press conferences. Why was that important to you?
I always try to be different. You know what I mean? I whether it's on the field, off the field, doing my contract, whatever, I'm just trying to be different. And so I felt like I'm a pretty closed off person to an extent. Unless you're around me in person, I rarely put a lot of stuff on social media or anything like that. And so I was just looking for a way for people to get to know me. And I was just like, all right, well, let me talk about some of the stuff that I'm doing. And I just got the idea of like, the Wednesday press conferences, I don't always like to do it. Like, I don't always like to just go up there and just, get football questions.
How come? That's weird.
Like you just, sometimes you just don't want to do it. And so I was like, I'm like, all right, I'm going to make this interesting. And I'm like, let me make it to where I can capture their attention while they get mine. And so I was like, let me just talk about stuff that I'm doing, stuff that I'm interested in, and stuff that I appreciate. And in the process, I feel like they'll learn something about me that's not football related, and then maybe they'll ask me more questions that are not all just football related. And then, I could talk football all day. I can talk team, and I could talk all that stuff all day. But I think it's important to show a different side of athletes because, there's more to us than just our profession.
I think it's interesting. I don't know that I'd made this connection until hearing you just now, but Marshawn obviously had his own issues with doing those press conferences that he didn't want to do, and both of you sort of found a way to use them, him by not talking, you by talking about what you wanted to really shine the light in some different places.
Yeah, I think that's the whole thing. Like, I just feel like it's we have this platform, and I think it's up to us to figure out unique ways to use it. And that's kind of what I did. I just try to figure out like what is a different way, what hasn't been done before. And I looked around, I think nobody really talks about anything consciously. Like sometimes me, a person might hear something you've done and ask you about it, but nobody's came and just I'm going to start my press conference like this, and then y'all can ask me whatever you guys want. And so it made it fun for me because each week I had to come up with a different topic, whether it be a book, whether it be, yoga, meditation, or whatever. Like it challenged me to think about what I wanted to talk about. So sometimes there was some days some of the topics that came up were really just genuine topics that I was literally just talking about to teammates or to friends or whoever right before walking up. And I just extended the conversation as I went up to the podium.
Bobby Wagner with me for a few more minutes here on Seattle Sports on 710, Mike Salk Show. Let's talk a little bit more football. What do you think happened with the defense the last few years here in Seattle? I mean, we talked about how good that Legion of Boom team was. The last couple of years, especially at the beginnings of the year, there were some real challenges, giving up a lot of yards. What do you think happened?
Yeah, I just feel like, especially these last few years, I just feel like we always got off to a slow start. Like we would, give up a ridiculous amount of yards. And even last year was crazy because if you look at our yardage, we were bottom, if not, the bottom of the list. But if you looked at our situational football, we were top 5, third down, red zone, things of that nature. And so we just struggled to kind of put it all together. It was you would have these moments where a team would drive, then we would stop them. And we just couldn't eliminate being on the field. I was looking at it at some point in the season. I believe myself, Diggs, and Jamal had the most plays in the league by a long shot. We were playing, I think we had 200 more plays than the next closest person. And that just showed we were, we had trouble getting off the field. And, I can't really put a pinpoint on what exactly was the reason to that. But I do feel at some point of each of those seasons we were able to figure it out. But, sometimes that was just too late.
There was a lot of conversation in town about whether it was a communication thing, a scheme thing, or a talent thing. Would you point to one of those three as being the biggest factor?
I think it's a combination of all of them. All of it, to be honest. I think there was, we definitely had to communicate better. We definitely had to just execute the scheme, and sometimes the trust wasn't always there. And you think about COVID, you think about all these different things where, normally you get to be around one another and have I was talking to Jordan a while ago, and, this might be his first real off season where you have OTAs and everything like that. I think up until this point, he's never had a real off season, so it's little things like that do matter, do mean something, I think do play a part in how everything kind of turns out.
You mentioned trust, and I wonder whether that's a challenge with a guy like Jamal Adams out there, not to trust him personally, but because he can innovate and maybe, not necessarily be where the scheme tells him to be at times. Would that have been easier with some of those off seasons to kind of understand the way he plays the game specifically?
No, I wouldn't necessarily just pinpoint Jamal. I think it's a holistic. I think there's a way that I play that, being able to play more, Jamal could understand, Diggs could understand. Even as a linebacker playing behind, certain D linemen, they have a tendency to do certain things on certain run plays, and being able to kind of recognize that faster, not just myself, but everybody. I think that just all comes with repetition. And, unfortunately, we weren't able to execute that.
You mentioned earlier that you can take criticism, and it's one of the things I admire quite a bit about you, and you and I have talked about this in the past. Take me through your productivity over the last couple of years, because from our perspective and sitting here in the media, the impact plays don't seem to have come as often. Can you take me through where you've been at in your career?
I mean, I understand. I mean, like you said, we've talked about it. I understand where you're coming from. I feel like the production from a statistical standpoint has been there. You know, there's still the tackles are still around the same. Sacks are still around the same, even though, like, you know, I think last year was my least. I blitzed the least. Obviously, I can make more plays in coverage. I just think some of the fronts didn't necessarily allow me to come downhill the way that I was able to come downhill early on in my career. You know, earlier in my career, we were more of an under front, we were more of an over front. You know, the front that we moved to these later part in my career, it was the stick front, and it was not necessarily come downhill. It was read behind the blockers. And, you know, teams were doing a good job of releasing that guard because there was nobody touching the guard. And so I understand the criticism. I hear the criticism. I have no problem with embracing it. And I look forward to, like I said to you, I look forward to proving a lot of the doubters wrong, because I still feel like I'm one of the best linebackers in this league, and I plan on proving that this year.
Well, I got a lot
against you guys.
Exactly. I got a lot of respect for that. I don't know that I've ever had an athlete in my career get in touch with me the way you did. I hope you don't mind me expressing that to the people here. That you texted me and said, "Hey, what's up?" And I have a lot of respect for your ability to talk through that, and it actually makes me think even a little bit differently about your ability to potentially have had that conversation with Pete and John about kind of where you were at in your career and how they viewed you. It is somewhat unique amongst not just NFL players, but professional athletes in general.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, like that the conversation that we had would have been an example of letting you know that I'm open to criticism. Criticism is a part of life. Like, you know, if you're not doing something, if you're not being criticized, then you're probably not doing something of importance. So I'm open to it. At the end of the day, like, the moment you close off to certain criticism or certain things, then you stop getting better, because that's how you grow. You point out something that you need to improve, which somebody might call criticism, and you get better at it. And that's how you keep getting better. And as I watch guys like Ray Lewis, and I watch guys like Navarro Bowman and Patrick Willis and Lance Briggs and Michael Singletary, those guys, when I had conversation with them, the few that I've been fortunate enough, they've always had an open mind to getting better. And that's what's made them stay around so long. And, you know, my goal and my dream is to be in the class of those guys. And I've always been in a place where I want to continue to learn, continue to understand the criticism, and get better. And that's how I looked at it. And so even when it came to negotiating the contract or the business side of things, you know, I feel like I've shown, not only with you, but just with them, I've shown that I have the ability to take criticism and grow from it. And if I was given the opportunity, you know, things could have been different.
Maybe this is a segue, maybe not, but with all of that in mind, why do you think Russ isn't here anymore?
I'm not sure. I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to let Russ kind of tell his side of the story. I think Russ had an amazing career here. He impacted Seattle in many, many ways. And so I wouldn't be doing Russ right if I'm speaking on his behalf. Mm-hmm. So I'll let Russ kind of address that whenever he feels like it.
Well, Bobby, let's end it there. And what I'll say is, as you talk about those Hall of Fame linebackers and people that you just mentioned, I think everyone in Seattle would argue that you were right there with them already, certainly in the hearts and minds of people here. And not just for your play on the field, although obviously there's a lot to be admired there, but for the way you handle your business, for the way you come on a show like this and talk the way you do. And I think for inspiring a lot of folks around this city to be better. So, on behalf of the people of Seattle who don't all get to talk to you today, I know one day they will. One day you'll be here in the Ring of Honor, I would assume, and you'll have your moments to be honored back in this city. But for anyone who doesn't get an opportunity to say so today, I'll say thank you for your years here in Seattle.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate, you know, if everybody's in the city's listening, I appreciate the love that I received, especially over these last few weeks. I am truly grateful. And if there's anything that I would put out there selfishly, I would say I do feel like that 54 should be a jersey that shouldn't be worn again. But that's just me selfishly saying that out loud.
I mean, you're not even wearing it again. You're wearing 45.
Yeah, I'm going to something different. I'm moving to something different, and it's literally the same number. It's just flipped because my numbers always have to equal 9. So
no, that's what Jordan came back with, right? Didn't Jordan come back wearing 4-5?
And I came back, and coming back to LA, coming back home. So that's just been 2, and I'm a brand Jordan. So trust me, we're working on that too.
I love it, Bobby. I don't think anyone's going to wear 54 here ever again. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time here in Seattle, and we'll talk again. Good luck.
Thank you.